Today, I want to revisit a story I've actually reported on previously because I think it's becoming even more significant the deeper people begin to look into it. Also, very special shout out to Heather Cox Richardson, who I follow and whose historical analysis on subjects just like these are incredibly important. So, thank you. A few days ago, I talked about Trump and the administration's proposal surrounding the massive $1.776 billion fund tied to people who claim they were politically targeted around January 6th. At first glance, a lot of people might just see this number as another large political number, but I want to look closer at this. So, 1.776, that's their number. 1776. That symbolism matters a lot. 1776 obviously is the year of the American Revolution, the year of the Declaration, the year associated with rebellion against centralized authority, and the founding mythology of the United States itself. But the modern politics, especially after January 6th, 1776 has increasingly become something much more politically charged. You saw rioters on January 6th chanting 1776. We've seen slogans referencing another 1776. We've seen extremist movements and factions inside American politics increasingly using 1776 language as shorthand for resistance, for revolution, for reclaiming the country through confrontation. So when people look at the proposed 1.776 billion taxpayer backed fund connected to many of the same political ecosystems surrounding January 6th, they're not viewing that symbolism as random. And honestly, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask questions about this. Now, here's where the story becomes even more concerning. Donald Trump, his sons, and the Trump Organization itself had initially sued the IRS for $10 billion over leaked tax return information connected to a former IRS contractor. But according to reporting in court proceedings, the judge overseeing the case reportedly questioned whether the lawsuit itself even made sense because Trump is simultaneously suing the government while also serving as president over the executive branch that controls these very agencies. Then the lawsuit was dropped, not settled through a court, dropped. But immediately afterwards, the administration announced what they described as a settlement style agreement tied to broader compensations and a fund. According to reports, the structure of the fund itself would involve very limited oversight, with leadership heavily connected to Trump and Trump appointed officials and the executive branch itself. Now, I'd argue this effectively creates a politically controlled financial structure using taxpayer money, our money, with minimal, if any, accountability. And this is where Heather Cox Richardson made a historical point, I think, that is really important. So, historically, even controversial presidents generally understood that the office itself was supposed to be bigger than personal loyalty, bigger than personal protection, or even personal financial interest. She brought up the Chester Arthur individual, a president often associated with corruption before even taking office, who nevertheless reportedly recognized he became president that the presidency carries obligations beyond himself personally. And I think that's the deeper issue here, because what many people are saying is there's increasingly fear around corruption and in the traditional sense. It's the merging together of executive power, of political loyalty, of financial protection and legal insulation, and symbolic political movements all in one. This is one interconnected system, and historically, Democracies become unstable when citizens begin believing powerful people operate on entirely different rules than everyone else, especially during periods of economic stress, especially when trust in institutions are already eroding, and especially when political movements begin increasingly framing themselves through revolutionary symbolism and loyalty narratives instead of democratic accountability. And again, this is where symbolism really matters because 1776 historically represents the founding of a democratic experiment, one we're in today. The concern, though, is now whether that symbolism is increasingly being repurposed to justify concentrated power or political retaliation and personal loyalty to individual leaders instead of these institutions themselves. Follow this channel, like, subscribe, and I will continue covering the political stories that are shaping our country right now.